Welcome, everyone, and thank you again for joining our podcast. Tonight, I have the distinct advantage and opportunity to share with you one of our candidates that's running for state representative in Baldwin County. Danielle Duggar is challenging Representative Matt Simpson in Baldwin County, representing Daphne and Spanish Fort. Danielle, thank you and welcome to our podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Great, great. Heard you had a busy day knocking on doors there around Daphne and Spanish Fort. What kind of feedback are you getting on the campaign trail?
A lot of good feedback. People are excited. They resonate with my message. They're ready for change. We've got a lot of support out there, so it's looking good, and I'm excited to speak with so many voters. We've been to 3,400 and some odd houses now, and spoke with a lot of voters. So it's been great.
Well, the interesting thing about about your race and also all across the state, we've been interviewing candidates and also representatives from across the state of Alabama. It's very, very interesting dynamic. We've seen a lot of anti-incumbency, and I can understand that after this last legislative session, which is going to end probably the day after tomorrow. Um, People are upset. They're upset about affordability. They're
Yes.
upset about the change in the laws to from basically how they elect the Public Service Commission that controls our electorate rates. They're upset about Blue Cross Blue Shield taking their premiums. They're upset about the Department of Environmental Management being gutted basically, and so their waterways are going to be potentially damaged without any consequence. And right there next to you, up near Stockton, just north of you, they're upset about a large solar farm going in there, which could have devastating environmental impacts to the whole Delta, which obviously can affect your district, particularly that edge of Mobile Bay and down to that area. So I'm hearing a lot of anti-incumbency. So what are you getting that same sentiment in your campaign?
Oh, absolutely. And, they're just frustrated because they feel like they don't have a voice. In my case, they voted for this person a couple times now. Some of them have, and they don't feel like they have good representation. Their concerns are not being addressed, and they see things passing in the legislature like renaming the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. And the voters are frustrated. They tell me every day, like, that nonsense doesn't matter to them. What matters to them is that they're paying an enormous amount of tax on every gallon of gasoline they put in their car. They can't afford groceries. Their paychecks are not going as far and they're taxed to death. So these are things that the voters care about. They want the woke nonsense out of our schools. They just want to feel like their concerns are being addressed by their current representatives and their current state senators. And a lot of time they're not.
Right. We've got this moniker at Christian Coalition. Really, it boils down to three things, Danielle: meals, mortgage, and medicine. And
Right.
unlike any time before in our history, everybody, even regardless of their income now, they're having to decide whether what kind of meal am I going to have? Am I going to be able to pay my mortgage? Am I going to have to pay part of that or put it off in a split payments or something like that? And either forego their health insurance or figure out a way to pay for their medicines or not take their medicines. And
Yeah.
this is an atrocity in a nation like us to have these type of choices. And the legislature really hasn't helped in any of those areas. Actually made things worse in a lot of ways. So that's what we're hearing back. So it's kind of refreshing to hear what you're saying is kind of the same type of sentiment.
And even
Uh,
in my more affluent district and more affluent areas of my district, we still see that. I mean, people are still, even middle class, they're struggling trying to get by from paycheck to paycheck. So there has not been any relief past this session. And in fact, we've grown our state budget again.
right. Yeah, and sadly, a lot of the resource for the state budget was amazing to me. Some of it was it going to actually enhance payments for illegal aliens, enhance payments to school districts had more illegal aliens. I thought we were supposed to be trying to get them out of our schools and get them out of our country. Yet we're actually making them more entrenched. And some of the things that seem to wholly the antithesis of what the Trump administration is trying to accomplish. So we see that. Let's talk a little bit now, drill down a little bit. There's a seem like a quite a contrast between your vision, your priorities, and what's being espoused by Representative Simpson, and also the money. There seems to be the money travels, and that seems to be what influences how people vote. Seems to be instead of on principle. So, can you talk to us a little about those issues, some specifics that you've seen that maybe contrast your campaign and your priorities with Representative Simpson's?
Sure. So the reason why I ran for this seat is because of my representative's voting record. So, Simpson back in 2018, they all voted for that gas tax, which was a 10-cent increase set to go up every other year. That's something I would have never voted for. It's my understanding that the governor strong-armed them into voting for it, but that's not something that, as a conservative, as a fiscal conservative, that I would do. We don't need to raise taxes. We need to cut waste and be more efficient with the money that we've already given to our government. Recently, in the 2025 legislative session, my opponent voted for gun restrictions. So the restriction on gun accessories and expanded the list of prohibited persons, so including a red flag law. These are things that I would never vote for. Again, as a constitutional conservative, I want to defend and protect the Second Amendment without infringement. We had during COVID a struggle with private employers forcing employees to take a vaccine or get fired. That was during COVID. That was before the 2022 race. And I was a strong advocate for health freedom, for people being able to choose whether or not they took an experimental vaccine or any medicine for that matter. All medicine should be given based on informed consent. So if you do not, if you're not informed of the risks versus the benefits, and you do not give consent under, if you're giving consent under coercion or threat of penalty, that's not true consent. So I was a big advocate for informed consent, and my opponent was not. And then most recently, I believe was a big issue was the gambling and casino package that they nearly passed in the 2024, I would believe, legislative session. And it was comprehensive gambling and casino package. There were, there was an entire government department that would be over gambling. They had full policing powers. There wasn't a whole lot of state oversight, and that money was not earmarked for education. So a lot of folks, when I go around talking to them about gambling, sometime I hear individuals saying that they would like to have a lottery because they want that money to go toward education. And that just simply wasn't the case. Never mind the fact that there's no such thing as just a lottery only. Once we remove the constitutional prohibition and we allow class 3 casinos and gaming, which is a lottery is class 3, we're automatically going to have we will be authorizing all of our existing Indian reservation, Indian tribal lands that have gaming to have anything up to class 3, which is your full table games, your lottery, which is included in that for the state, but then they can have full casinos. So it's kind of a fallacy to think, oh, we're just going to pass a lottery and we're going to put all that money in education. We've already got a ton of money in education. Another bill my opponent voted for was the Numeracy Act, and this was back, I believe, prior to the 2022 election when I first ran against him. But that bill, we've got 700 math tutors. These are specialists. These are math teaching specialists who were going to go out. The state's paying for this, $150 million a year, to send these tutors out to the schools to help the elementary school teachers teach elementary school math. We shouldn't be in a situation where these highly educated, intelligent individuals, such as our teachers, are struggling to teach elementary school math. That's happening because we still have Common Core in our state education standards. So eliminating Common Core would have saved the state hundreds of millions of dollars a year alone, just in that math Numeracy Act, and would have enabled the teachers to better teach the material, students to better understand it, and our students to achieve more and perform better. and our parents to not be so frustrated. That's one thing that these parents are talking about when I go door to door is they're like, can you do something about that crazy math? Because they're trying to help their students with the homework. And the way we were taught to do math in school is not the same way the kids are being taught today. So there's just a lot of differences where I stand on these issues versus where my opponent stands and where a lot of the legislature stands. It's not just him, there's a whole group of them. And they're consistently voting to grow government, to restrict individual rights and freedoms, to take more of our tax dollars, waste more of our money. Um, and then, the icing on the cake is wanting to eliminate violation of criminal penalties for violating our state's ethics. So, where's the accountability? There's a lack of accountability and there's a lack of communication between the voter, what the voter wants, and what their representative who is elected to vote for them on their behalf is doing.
Well, that's you outlined that very well. And just speaking to the math issue, I remember working with my granddaughter, and my son was working with him who's was a national merit scholar, and he says this doesn't make sense how they want to teach him how to do math, and that is the
Right.
frustration of all the parents. So all the parents, and there's so much money going in these programs for education, way beyond. They don't even know what to do with the education trust fund. I can tell you, just in this last few days of the session, they just opened the book, said, "Hey, how much money do y'all want for these different things?" And they would appropriate money for the universities, knowing that was going to be a pass through to some project that was basically owned or some connection to the legislator. It was just a quid pro quo, and so it was mind boggling. But I think the other thing that's frustrating, I'm sure, as you as a challenger to people that are already entrenched in this network, as Representative Simpson is, and getting so much money for all that, um, the opacity, I guess, was in the and the lack of transparency where this money is coming from.
Uh,
We recently talked about this American Conservative Fund. You may see some flyers on that. Hundreds and hundreds of thousand dollars. It's a front for the gambling people to
yes.
put money into these campaigns to basically own these legislators. Can you speak to this money and how that influences these votes? These people that even your challenger, the representative you're challenging, how that affects his vote, for example.
Right. So, I'll tell you, when I'm going door to door, I see the flyers in the mailboxes. I've actually spoken to voters while they're standing there holding a gigantic flyer, going out for my opponent from the American Conservative Fund, which is, like you said, the I'm sorry, the front for DraftKings, which is the biggest online casino and sports betting company in North America. So these casino interests are putting hundreds of thousands of dollars into these races in Alabama alone and nationwide. They're doing it in Ohio as well. I talked to a legislator up there who's challenging an incumbent, and they're doing it up there as well to try and get full casino, support up there. We've got this situation where the voters are seeing a message saying this person is MAGA, this person is a pro-Trump conservative, this person protects gun rights, and it's false. I mean, it's all false. If you look at their voting record, it's anything but that. But that money is being funneled in, and it's intentionally trying to deceive the voters so that these people can stay in office. So if you look at any of their campaign finance reports, you can kind of tell what side they're on. You see PAC donation after PAC donation after PAC donation. All of these PACs are donating, they're funding the incumbents' races. So as a challenger, going up against someone who's very well funded, 200,000 plus in their campaign accounts, it is a challenge. But I will tell you, the first time I ran in 2022, I did not have any support from any PACs. This time I do have the support of our Alabama farmers, and I'm very thankful for them. They're conservative, as am I, and we want the same things. We don't want casinos to pass in the state. We want to protect our farmlands. Well, in 2022, I didn't have any support. I was outspent 7-1 in that race, and I still managed to get 45% of the vote. So it is a challenge for a challenger going up against an incumbent who's well funded. And sometimes with this out of state dark money that's coming in and lying and deceiving the people, but it's not an impossible challenge. It is definitely winnable. And that's what I'm seeing as I go door to door. The minute I tell people, hey, you know that mailer's from DraftKings, right? They're shocked and they're appalled that it's just a blatant attempt to deceive them. And I think it's kind of shameful, to be honest.
Well, it's interesting because I interviewed I interviewed Representative Simpson and asked him specifically about his stand on gambling. He says he's personally against it, but he thinks people should allow the vote. I said, well, what happens to Gulf Shores and Orange Beach when this gambling had? Oh, we're going to insulate that. And I just knew. I told him, I said, no, there's no way you can insulate that, Representative Simpson. If you give a vote like that and support that, the money will flow in, and you will change the whole dynamics of Orange Beach and Gulf Shores. It'll no longer be more like Pottersville
Yes,
as you saw in It's a Wonderful Life. That's what it'll look like,
yes.
and that's what the people we hope in your district will understand. That we're going to try to message that as well. That this is a dead end street, a route to economic disaster in the long run, poverty, creating crime, and all the other things go along, drugs and prostitutions that follow gambling and organized crime. And that's been the history of all these gambling initiatives that we've seen across the country.
And that's why I have the endorsement of the Orange Beach Mayor, Tony Kennon, for those reasons. He does not want gambling and casinos coming to his town. So, I'm with the mayor on that one. I appreciate his endorsement, and we've just it's going to change the character of our county. And we are conservatives here. Even though some folks might like to go and gamble, they might think it's fun. We don't want it in our backyard. We don't want it in our residential areas, our residential neighborhoods. That's going to destroy our family-friendly community that we have. And even the most pro-gambling person doesn't want it in their backyard. So
Yes,
that's the message. And that's whether or not you've got an exemption for Baldwin County, that's not permanent. We all know that can all change with the stroke of a pen and one line item amendment in a future session. So that is a false protection and a false sense of security for Baldwin County. And I hope that people don't fall for that.
well, that's great. Well, Danielle, we wish you a lot of luck in your campaign. Appreciate you taking time to speak with us at Christian Coalition, and all our members are that live down in Baldwin County. We appreciate of that, and at least to hear more about your vision, the differences between you and Representative Simpson. And remember to vote on May 19th. Everyone across the state, we're going to be electing governor, lieutenant governor, all the statewide offices, and the state legislature, both the Senate and the House Representatives, where Danielle's been running. So please remember to vote on May 19th. Again, thank you for being a part of our broadcast. Thank you, Danielle. We appreciate your time, and God bless you. And don't forget to vote on May 19th in the Republican primary. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Brinson.